Did you know that 70% of real estate leads go cold because agents don't follow up after the first month? Well, if you're a developer, we can fix this with AI. My name is Quincy. I'm the founder of Good Looking AI, and we build voice AI solutions for businesses to help them save time and automate tedious tasks. For today's video, I'm going to guide you on how to build a lead reactivation system from scratch that would trigger outbound calls to old buyer and seller leads. We'll use Vapi as our conversational AI assistant, Make for our automation, and Airtable for our database. But before we begin, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Okay, so before we dive into development, let's look into a closer detail on how we can implement this solution. This project is a voice AI powered lead reactivation system that will be ideal for real estate agents and teams. It will follow up with cold leads using dynamic outbound calls triggered through Make, the automation platform, and will pull in the data from Airtable and will power the whole conversation on Vapi. Now, the goal overall is to help agents re-engage with old buyers and sellers without lifting a finger. So ideally, this solution would be perfect for busy agents who want consistent, personalized follow-ups to their old leads. Now, the tech stack is going to be Vapi for the conversational agent. We'll use Make, the automation platform, to trigger out the outbound calls and make updates to the Airtable. We'll use Cal for the booking platform for when users are ready to discuss about their options via selling or buying. And we'll use Airtable as the database and also the main UI for the user, the real estate agent, that they will engage with to be able to determine the performance of their outbound campaign. Okay, so here in this figjam file, I like to always map out and design the architecture of the solution before I go into development. And one of the crucial steps is going to be configuring our Vapi assistant. Now, I went ahead and have everything laid out from the buyer's prompt to the flow, the seller's prompt to the summary prompt, so that we can understand before we go into development all the components needed to set up our Vapi assistant. Right? So just to quickly walk through it, here we have a buyer's prompt, and all this will be available below in the description so that you can follow along. So I have this buyer's prompt, we have a booking flow protocol that we'll use, and all the tools that's necessary to connect and check the availability and also book into the calendar via Cal. We have the seller prompt along with the booking flow again. And we have all the tools. Now, I want to dive into this a little bit more. There's going to be 4 core tools that this AI assistant will be using. The first one being is the get date time tool, which we'll set up on Make using webhooks. So overall, this tool is just to help give our AI assistant date and time context so it knows exactly when it's talking to the user, and it can handle natural query requests like tomorrow or next week. It can use the data that will be returned from this tool so that it can navigate through the conversation and discuss about time options, especially when booking appointments. Next is the Get Cal Open Slots tool. This is going to be used so that the AI assistant can check the availability of the real estate agent. In this scenario, let's say we have Tom as the real estate agent that the AI is calling on behalf of, right? So we will look into Cal and check the available slots based off the event ID, and we'll set this up later on in the process when we start integrating with Cal's APIs. Now, we also have the book call tool. So let's say if we have a user that is interested, a buyer or seller, but they're not ready to be transferred to the agent Tom just as yet, well, we can schedule them in for a booking. Once we understand the user's agreed appointment date and time, we can schedule and create an event via booking with Cal's APIs to book an event. The last tool that we'll be using that we will create for the AI assistant is the transfer to agent tool. Now, this will be used whenever we have a call where they are very interested in discussing more about their buying and selling options and want to be connected to a live agent or team member right away. We'll use this tool so that it can trigger that transfer instantly so that we can ensure that we're connecting the hot buyers and sellers to the real estate agent right away. And this is just going to bring more revenue, more leads, more business to the real estate, which is always a good thing. So making it as easy as possible for the user to be connected to a live person is going to be crucial. So this tool right here is very important. And then we also have this summary analysis prompt. Now, again, this will be available down below in the description so you can paste into there. Now, this prompt is pretty lengthy. Now, depending on your use case, you can adjust this. But overall, it's to provide a very thorough end call report. And for an actual live client project that's in production, there's going to be a lot of data points that you're going to be working with to provide a good user experience to the agent so they can understand what's going on with the analytics regarding their call, right? But for the sake of this video, you can just use this summary, plug it in to the end call analysis summary so that it can generate thorough summaries of the calls. Now, that's pretty much the Vapi setup. Next, let's dive into Airtable. So there's going to be two main things that we need to set up in Airtable. We'll need to set up a table which will act as the leads list with old buyers and old sellers, right? And some of the variables, columns that we'll be working with is the last contact. So we're going to use this data point to implement logic on when we should be contacting the lead. If it's been over 30 days, and then that's when we want to trigger the outbound call, right? So we'll use this variable to keep track of when was the last time the user was contacted. We'll have the first name variable, last name variable, their phone number, email, their type. Are they either a buyer or are they seller? We'll also have special notes so that we can add personalized follow-ups to the AI assistance script, and then also the property interest, just in case if they are a buyer or they are a seller, whatever it may be, we can assign that property to this variable. Along with setting up the leads list, we'll also need to set up the agent's dashboard UI. Now, this is going to be for the user experience of either the real estate team or the real estate agent that is using this type of solution, right? Now, and there's going to be a lot of things that you can do to improve on top of this, but for the sake of this video, this is a good starting point. We want the users that are going to be using this type of system to have a good user experience. So using something like Airtable, we can set up like a dashboard or a workspace that the real estate agent can look at so they can understand what's going on with the AI assistant and the calls that are happening, which leads are interested, who booked an appointment, who initiated a transfer, what were good calls, what are calls where users said, take me off the list. We can keep track of all that data in this dashboard UI so that the real estate agent have a clear understanding what's going on. Next up is how are we going to actually set up the automations in Make? So there's going to be two core scenarios. One's going to be used to trigger the outbound call, and the other one's going to be the tooling and end call report scenario. So the outbound scenario will be connected to a Airtable, which will search the records to see if there's any leads that's been over 30 days since we've contacted them. If the last contact is greater than or equal to 30 days, and then that's when we're going to trigger an HTTP request out to create a call, right? And actually this part right here, I just remove this. We'll be using one assistant for both buyer and seller, just so we can keep the system as efficient as possible. Now, the tooling and end call report scenario. We'll use a webhook. So all the data will be sent to this webhook for the tool calls and also the end call server message. Right. So at the very beginning of the call, the AI will use the get date time tool so that it can understand the date and time context. It will be returned the current day and also the next days for the week. So it can be able to handle query requests for like next week, next Monday, next Tuesday, next Friday, whatever it may be. And then we will be returning the data with a webhook response. Now, if the tool or the webhook call is the tool name of get cal open slots tool, and then we'll make an HTTP request to cal, and we'll get the bookable slots by the event ID. We'll return that back to the user so the user can choose the time that aligns with their schedule. Now the next tool is the book call tool. So once a user has agreed upon a time that is available with Tom's calendar schedule or Tom's team, whatever it may be, and then it will trigger the book call tool. It'll make an HTTP request to cal.com and book the event. It will return that response with a webhook response back to Vapi to confirm their appointment. Now, if the webhook call is a end call report, and then it will take all that data, all the structured data points, and it will search the Airtable to get that record. Once we get that record, we get the ID, and then we can update the record by the ID so that everything in the list is being reflected and up to date based on the calls that are happening with the lead and the AI assistant to help the agent understand what's going on with the calls. So this is a good general outline of how we're going to be building out the system. Again, I like to lay everything up front just to help me speed up the development and also prevent any issues that can happen down the line. But of course, as a developer, sometimes things don't always go as expected. So just note there may be some changes to this whole architecture as we move along the process and discover what things need to be changed and what things need to be tweaked. But we'll discover that as we move along through the video. But hopefully this provided a good high level view of how we can complete this. Now let's jump into the next step, which is starting to set up our Vapi account and get our assistants up and running. Okay, now I'm in Vapi. If you have a Vapi account, perfect, log in. If not, then use the link down below to create an account for free. We will be given free credits to build this assistant at no cost. So once you're in Vapi, you're going to want to navigate to the Assistants tab. We're going to click on Create Assistant. And I'm going to name this assistant Ava. I'm going to choose blank template and create assistant. Now, just to kind of cover some things, cost is going to be the cost per minute. Latency is going to be the delay between the user speaking and getting a response back from the LLM. So we want to try to choose a model that keeps this low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the GPT-4o mini cluster. And then I'm also going to adjust the temperature to be 0.7 so that our assistant's a little bit more on the creative side. And then for max tokens, I'm going to set this for 300. Now for the first message, this is going to be what the AI assistant's going to say whenever it makes the call. This is going to be the first message. And here we want to plug in the dynamic variable that will pass in from the HTTP request on make. So we're going to use double curly braces, and we're going to put in first underscore name. Now, the variables need to be exactly how we're going to set it up on make. So just keep that in mind. If you do not put your variables in correctly, that can lead to errors whenever it tries to reference the dynamic variable that's being passed to the call. And for the system prompt, I'm just going to paste in the prompt that I broke down previously in the figjam file, which I have it here. Okay. And then next, let's just choose our voice configuration. So I'm going to use page. And for additional configuration, I like to use the office background, but some may not like that. So you can just choose as your liking. Now for transcriber, I'm just going to keep it at its default setting. And then in the summary, I'm going to paste in the prompt that I broke down earlier, which I have right here. Okay. And we also have these data points that we'll need to set as structured data. So let's start knocking those out. Okay, so the following structured data points that we need is the outcome, the interest level, last contacted, next action, any notes from the call, and the do not call flag, just in case if we have a lead that does not want to be contacted. Okay, so for the structured data points and the tooling, I went ahead and laid it all out just to kind of speed up this whole process. And I'll just explain what I added and you can just follow along. So the core structured data points that we need is going to be the notes, outcome, next action, interest level, last contacted, and do not call requested. Now, how is this all going to play out in the entirety of the system? So when the call is done, an end call report will be sent to make, and this is what we'll use to update the table for that specific record, for that specific user, that lead, right? So the descriptions that I have assigned to each of these, so notes, it's going to be human readable summary of what was said, and the type is string. For outcome, it's going to be call result, scheduled appointment, voicemail left, transferred, or not interested. For the next action description, I have what to do next, schedule agent call, send CMA, follow up. For interest level, I have the lead warmth, hot, warm, cold, or none. These are all set to type string. Last contacted, for the description, I have the ISO timestamp of this call. And then the last data point is going to be do not call requested, which will be a type Boolean, so true or false. And for the description, I have DNC flag, do not call again, which will be either a true or false. So if it's true, that means that the user has requested us to not call again. If it's false, they have not made that request. Okay, so again, these are all the structured data points needed, and it's all outlined as well in this structured data prompt. So extract the following data points from the call, outcome, interest level, last contact, next action, notes, and do not call flag. Now, the next thing we need to set up is the tools. So we're going to have 4 core tools that Ava will be connected to. The first one being is the transfer call tool. We'll use this to transfer the user if they're hot and they want to speak to someone right away, whether it's buying or selling, and they want to discuss their options. This tool will be used to transfer the user to the live agent or a team member so they can handle the request immediately. Now for the destination, you're going to want to add your destination, connect whatever phone number that you want to be transferred to. Like in a real project build, you're going to assign the real estate agent's phone number, or if they have some sort of like team phone number, you're going to assign that right here. To the user, I like to always have a message stated whenever Ava or the assistant invokes a tool so that the user gets a good understanding of what's going on, right? So the message to the customer whenever the tool is invoked will be transferring you to Tom now. Please hold, and you can play around. Now, transfer plan. I have it set to blind transfer, meaning it's going to transfer to Tom or the real estate team without any given context. You can play around with this. You can either select warm transfer with message or warm transfer with summary so that the AI, Ava, provides context of what's going on before it actually hands over the user, right? But for now, I have it set to blind transfer. And that's going to be pretty much the settings for the transfer call tool. We also have book call tool. So this will be when a user is warm or hot, but they don't want to be transferred right away. Well, okay, we can provide them an option to book an appointment with them so they can schedule in a call with Tom or a real estate team. So this tool will be used to book the user in for their call with Tom, the real estate agent. Now, there are going to be some parameters that we're going to need. Essentially, what this is going to be doing, we're going to be connecting this to Cal's APIs so that we can book an event on the calendar. So the parameters that we need is the intent. For the description, I have this is the intent of the user. Are they a buyer or a seller? And what is their goal based on the interaction of the call? And the type is string. And then last name, pretty self-explanatory. This is the last name of the user. This is the first name of the user for the first name property. This is the phone number of the user for the phone number property. An appointment date and time. This is the date and time the user is booked in for in ISO 8601 date format, PST time zone. So you're going to want to adjust this. And I also have the offset number for PST, which will be LA, San Diego time zone. And then here, we're going to add in the webhook URL later on when we start setting up our make scenarios so that we can connect Vapi to make via a webhook. So the next tool is going to be the Get Cal Open Slots tool. This tool will be used to check the calendar availability in the real estate or of the real estate agent. So the only parameter that we need when we look at Cal's APIs, and we'll look at that later, is we only need to provide a start time. So the start time is going to be the preferred date and time. So when Ava is engaged with the user, right, and they have established interest that they would like to book a call with Tom or the real estate team, first we need to check the calendar availability in Cal based on the event. Now, what we need to provide is the start. That's what I was kind of mentioning earlier, but we're going to give it a name that's more aligned with the user, which is their preferred date and time. So the description is going to be, this is the preferred date and time the user would like to book in for in ISO 8601 format, PST. Again, you're going to want to adjust this for your specific time zone. And then again, we have to provide a webhook URL, but we'll do that later on in the process when we start setting up our make scenarios. Now, the last tool is going to be the get date time. Now, this is going to be used to invoke at the very beginning of the call so that Zoe has date and time context. It can handle users' queries whenever they try to say something like what is today or tomorrow, next week or next Friday, whatever it may be. So this tool will provide the current day, date and time in PST. You're going to want to adjust this for your time zone, of course. The response will have the following key. So the way it's going to work is we're going to be getting data back from the webhook response on make, but in form of JSON. And in JSON, you have key and value pairs. So there's going to be two keys pretty much for this response. There's going to be the current date time key, and the value will be formatted like this: Tuesday, and then the date format in ISO 8601. And then another key will be days of week, and the value will be formatted such as this. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so forth. What this is going to do, it's going to give the upcoming days for the next week so that Ava can handle natural language responses like next Friday, next Monday, next Tuesday, and handle that accordingly, right? So we're going to be providing today's date and also the upcoming dates along with the day of the week, right? And yeah, so you'll use this to response as your guide for date handling. Use the day of week value to determine queries like tomorrow, next Monday, and so forth. And we won't need to provide any parameters for this. But for the server settings, we'll need to provide the webhook URL. Again, we'll get that later on when we start creating our make scenarios. So essentially, that's going to be it for tools. We have the transfer call tool, book call tool, get cal open slots tool, and the get date time. So feel free to pause it whenever you need so that you can ensure that you have all these tools down correctly. So the next thing is going to be assigning a phone number to Ava so that it can make the outbound calls. We're going to navigate to phone numbers, create a phone number. Now, for the sake of this build, you could just use a free Vapi number, but if you already have phone numbers on Twilio, you can go ahead and import that. But for this video, I'm just going to use a free Vapi number. I'm going to punch in the area code, hit create, and it will automatically find a number, and it usually takes around 2 minutes to activate it. I'm going to give this a label of Ava. Just put outbound. And then here I'm just going to assign Ava as outbound settings. Okay. And then I'm going to hit save, and we just got to wait for this to fully activate. Okay. So now that we have the assistant prompt set up on Vapi, we have the summary prompt, the structured data points, and we also have the tools. Now we can navigate to Airtable so that we can start setting up our account and set up the table, which where all the buyer and seller leads will be, so that we can determine which ones we need to contact and not. So let's navigate to Airtable and get that set up. Okay, so now we're in Airtable. And this is where we're going to set up our records, which will be our database that will contain all the seller and buyer leads. So if you don't have an account, I'll provide a link below in the description so that you can sign up. But to get started, you're going to want to log in and we'll start setting up our leads table. Okay, so once you're in Airtable, you're going to want to create a workspace. So I already have a workspace created, which is this Ava Real Estate Lead Reactivation, but I'll simulate what it will look like to create a new workspace just in case if you're new to Airtable. So you're going to click on this create, and you can either build with AI, you can give it a prompt to help you speed up the process on creating the table, or you can build your own. I selected build your own. And then right here, you're just going to give it a name, and let's rename this to Ava. So we can name it something like Ava Real Estate Lead Reactivation. Okay. And then now we can click out of there. And then here we have our table. Now we're going to need to modify this a little bit so that it matches our data points, such as the first name, last name, property interest, the last contact. What else is there? Special notes. And yeah, so let's start adjusting this. So this far left side, I want this to be the type. We can hit save. So this will be where we list the buyer and the seller. And then for this one, I want to change this to a single line text, and let's just name this first name. Hit save. And then let's also right click on this. Let's insert to the right, and let's click single line text. Let's name this last name. Okay. And then the next thing we need is the phone number. So let's right click on this. Let's insert to the right. This time, let's choose phone number. And let's give this field name just phone number. And then let's right click on this, insert to the right. And this will be the property interest. So single line text. So if they are a buyer or a seller, this would be the ideal field to put down the property. Let's go ahead and let's redo this. Create field. And then we also need notes. So let's insert another one to the right. And we will do long text. And let's do special notes for Ava. Now this could be anything special about the specific lead that we know, such as maybe they have kids and they want to look for a home that's near a good schooling system, right? These are like special notes that we can provide to Ava so it has more context, therefore to personalize the outreach a little bit more. So let's just create this field, and I believe the rest of these other ones we don't need, so let's right click on assignee. Let's delete. We can delete this field, delete attachments, and just delete, and then also delete this field. Okay. So now we just need to populate our table with some dummy data. So what you can do is navigate to ChatGPT, and I already just gave it a very simple prompt. I need a dummy CSV file with a list of 20 old leads mixed between buyers and sellers. Column should be first name, last name, phone number, type, buyer or seller, last contact, property interest, and special notes, right? So it was able to just output this whole file, the CSV. You could just download it and then import it into Airtable. So I already have mine downloaded. And what you're going to do is click on table 1, click the down arrow. We're going to import data, click on CSV file. And then here, you're just going to browse, and then you're going to add in the file, the CSV file that you just downloaded from ChatGPT. Okay, so once you select your file, we're going to click on upload one file. And then here we can see all the data that's coming in. Now we're gonna, just to make sure that we're mapping it correctly to the correct column, because we can see here that it's not exactly how we need to be. We can see last name, it's mapping in the phone number, and for the phone number, it's mapping in the type, which is buyer or seller. So let's click on this map fields and let's fix this. So type is mapped to type, so that's good. The first name should be mapped to first name. Last name should be mapped to last name. Phone number, let's map this to phone number. And then also property interest, we can map this to property interest. And then last contact, let's map this to the last contact value. And then special notes, it's already mapped. So let's see, we have the type on the left, first name, last name, phone number, property interest, last contact, special notes. So now we can go ahead and hit import. But I already have the workspace set up. I just wanted to walk you through on how we can achieve this. But now I'm going to navigate back to the initial workspace that I have, which has the table imported already. Okay, so here I have my table. A few things to note is you're probably going to have this first row as the column header titles. So you're going to want to just delete that whole row because we don't need it. We already have the column title up above right here. And also just keep in note that phone numbers need to be formatted correctly. We'll fix this later on in the process when we start triggering the HTTP request to make the outbound call. But just to know, like the way these phone numbers are formatted right now, it will not work, especially with the extension numbers. So we will need to fix this, but at least we have the table down. So we have something to start working with. So ensure that you have all the fields mapped to the correct columns. And then we're ready to move to the next step. Start setting up our Cal account, connect it to a Google Calendar. And yeah, so let's navigate to Cal. Now we have to set up our Cal account so that we can create an event that the users can book in with if they establish the intent that they are an interested seller or buyer but don't want to be transferred to the live agent right away. So we'll use Cal to check the calendar availability and also book them in for calls with the real estate team or Tom. If you don't have a Cal account, you can use the link below down in the description to create an account. If you do, log in and we'll get started. Okay, so now I'm in my actual Cal account and we'll need to set up the event that we will book with. But first, we need to connect a Google Calendar. So you're going to want to navigate to Google Calendar. And now I'm in my Google Calendar account and we want to create a specific calendar that we'll use to book into. So you're going to navigate to this settings cog, settings, and then you're going to go to add calendar, create new calendar, and then set your time zone and give it a name. I'm going to name this one Tom Good Looking Realty, and you can add a description if you want. I'm not going to, just for this demo purpose. I'm going to create calendar. Okay, so if we navigate back to our calendar, we can see that we are checked off and we are looking at the Tom Good Looking Realty calendar that we just created. Now we can navigate back to Cal, and here we're going to go to settings, calendars, and we're going to toggle the main calendar off and only turn on the Tom Good Looking Realty. Therefore, when we're looking into the calendar for the availability and also trying to book calls into the calendar, we're only going to reference this calendar that we just created for this project. Now we can navigate back. I want to just walk you through some of these tabs here. So event types, this is where we're going to create our event so that we can book. Now here is where we have all the bookings. So when users book an appointment, we can view all this here. Availability. Now let's just quickly adjust this. So let's say we have a standard work schedule, Monday through Friday. I'm going to toggle this on. And let's just try to think of it as we are the real estate agent. When are they available to discuss their options with these potential buyers and sellers? So let's say they have a very busy schedule, but they have time, let's say 2 hours from 2 till 4 that they can handle these calls with these potential leads. So let's just change all of this to start from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Okay, so I have it all set from 2 to 4, Monday through Friday. So I'm going to hit save. And also in this next tab, we have teams. So if we want to set up some type of round robin or fixed round robin, really cool features that Cal has baked in. But for the sake, we'll be only using one calendar, essentially one account that we can schedule these bookings in for. We also have workflows, so we can actually run automations when a booking occurs, all on this platform. So that's pretty neat. There's also like a Cal template, call to confirm booking, follow up with no-shows. So that's something really cool to explore with on the side. So I'm going to navigate back to event types and let's create our first event. So I'm going to name this one something like 30 good looking realty team, right? And let's just set this to be a duration of 30 minutes. Hit continue. And then here we're in the basics tab. Now we can set here a description if we'd like. I'm just going to keep it like that. We can also see the URL of the booking page. And then here we can set the location. So I'm going to set this to Cal Video Global. Now, again, this is just for demo purposes. When you're actually working with the client, you need to discuss with them the best ways, the best media for them to communicate, whether that's a phone call, whether that's in person. But for now, I'm going to set it to Cal Video. And then I'm going to hit save. Always make sure that you hit save. And then we're going to go to availability. And we can see it's already following the availability that we have set in the previous step. Now in the limits, so let's say we want to add a minimum notice, right? This is the earliest a user can book an appointment in for. Let's say we want to do 2 days, just so we can give the team enough time to prepare for the call. And then we can also play around with the buffer. I'm just going to leave it as is and then hit save. And then for advanced, this part's very important. We want to make sure that we're adding to the correct calendar. Right now, it's choosing my default calendar. Switch this to the calendar that we created before. Tom, good looking realty. And then what we want to do is scroll down to the booking questions. Now it says here confirmation, what your booker should provide to receive confirmations. Now, right now, by default, it's set to email, but I always recommend using phone. The reason why is because collecting emails through some sort of voice interaction can always be a hit or miss. Sometimes users have a hard time explaining or providing their email, and sometimes the AI assistants can have errors in the whole text to speech, speech to text to speech process, which could cause hallucination. So I always recommend just try avoiding collecting email altogether and just use the phone. So as we can see, the questions that we need by default is we need the name of the person that's booking, and we also need the phone number. And then the rest is just optional and hidden. So the only thing we really need to provide to book this actual call with the lead is the name and the phone number. Okay. And then we're going to hit save. And that's essentially all that we need to set up with our Cal account so far. We may need to make changes down the road, but I think it's fine for now. Now, another thing I want to point out is we do have webhooks. So we can create webhooks on cal.com if a booking happens, and then we can trigger something to send out an email, whatever it may be. So we can implement automations or workflows based off of booking events that occur. So that's something to keep in mind that you can do as well. Now, the next thing I want to break down is some of the API routes that we're going to need to work with Cal. So if you navigate to Cal Docs, so cal.com/docs, and navigate to API version 2 reference, we're going to need 2 API endpoints. We're going to need the create a booking, and we're also going to need, if we scroll down and go to slots, we are also going to need to get available time slots for an event type. So just to briefly look over the documentation, again, we're going to come back to this when we start setting up the HTTP modules on Make so that we can connect to Cal's APIs. But we are going to need to make a GET request to this URL endpoint. We'll need to provide some headers, Cal API in the version, which state is stated right here. And we're also going to need to provide a start time and an end time, which we'll configure that later on in the process. But the other API endpoint that we need is going to be create a booking. So here, create a booking, and we're going to need to hit this URL endpoint of type post. We're going to need to have headers, content type, application JSON, the Cal API version, and we also need to provide a body, like a body request, right? So this is what we need to provide: a start time, an attendee object. We'll also need to provide the event type ID. Now, the event type ID, where do we actually find that? So if we navigate back to the event type and we click on this event that we just created, if you look at the top, the URL, which you probably won't be able to see on my screen, Screen Studio is probably cutting that off, but you will see a 7-digit number, right, that signals your event type. So we're going to need to reference this when we start checking for the availability and also when we book the actual appointment into Cal. But essentially, I think I covered all the points needed for Cal. So we created our first event. We also took a brief look into the different APIs that we're going to need to work with. Now we have to navigate to Make, start setting up our scenarios for the different tooling and also the in-call report, and connect everything on that platform. All right, guys, I quickly just want to point out my background does look different. I had made some desk arrangements to my current setup, so I just wanted to point that out. But now that we have Vapi, Cal, and also the Airtable account set up, now it's time for us to start laying down our scenarios that we'll be using for this outbound lead reactivation system. So if we reference our figjam file and look at our make design, we have 2 core scenarios. We have the outbound scenario, where we search the Airtable records and we determine to see if it's been over or equal to 30 days. If so, and then we trigger out an HTTP request to Vapi via their API so that we can create a call and we'll pass in the dynamic variables. Now, the second scenario is for our tooling. So we have 3 core tools that the make scenario will be implementing, which is the get date time tool, the get cal open slots tool, and then the book call tool. And then we'll also set up our end call reporting in this second scenario. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and navigate to Make and let's get started. So if you have a Make account, perfect. If this is your first time using Make, I have a link below down in the description so that you can sign up. And I believe you're given around 1,000 free monthly operations so that you can build this lead reactivation system at no cost. So when you're in Make, we're going to want to click on this create scenario. And the first thing to do is just rename it so we can keep everything tidied up and organized. So I like to just name it by the assistant, and let's just call this scenario 1. So the scenario 1 will be in charge of triggering the outbound call. So let's set that up. Now, if we look back at our design again, we can see we just pretty much have 2 modules. We have a Airtable, and then we also have this HTTP request so that we can utilize Vapi's APIs. Another thing we'll probably add is like a sleep module, but let's go ahead and just start that now. So here we want to choose a Airtable module, and we want to search for records. Now, if this is your first time using Airtable on Make, there are some connection steps that we need to follow. So you're more likely going to need to click Add. You're going to select connection type, or you're going to select Airtable OAuth. Now, this will prompt you to another screen where you'll have to log into your Airtable account. But if you're already logged in, it should automatically push you through at no problem. So you're just going to select Airtable OAuth, log in so that you can establish your connection to your Airtable account. So I already have my connection established. Okay, so here you want to select the workspace that you created for this project. So in my case, I named the workspace Ava Real Estate Lead Reactivation. Now, if I navigate back to Airtable, we can see that we have this Ava Real Estate Lead Reactivation, and then we also have this table 1. So essentially, we're just connecting our workspace and the table where we have all the leads at. So you're going to select the base, and then table is going to be table 1. And then here, this is where we're going to be filtering on how we're going to check which leads have been, it's been over 30 days to contact, right? So the specific formula that we're going to be using is this right here. And again, you can pause it and type it in, or I'll also provide it in the description with a link with all the resources so that you can use that and just paste it in to make it easier for you guys. But it is before, has to be in all caps, open and close parentheses. And then right here, we're going to be using an open and close squiggly bracket. And then we want to add in last contact date. Now, keep in mind that this needs to be exactly the same with how you have it labeled here. If you don't, and then it won't properly filter out this column, which we need to determine how long it's been since the last contact date, right? So again, just keep that in mind. So last contact date, and then it's comma, and then we're going to use a date add function, all caps, and then open and close parentheses. And then inside the open and close parentheses, we're going to add in today in all caps, open and close parentheses. And then right here, we're going to use a comma, and then we're going to use the dash 30. So here we're trying to determine if it's been over 30 days, right? And then here we want to use single quotes, and inside here put in days. So this filter, this formula essentially is checking if the lost contact date is before 30 days, or if it's been longer than 30 days. That's pretty much what's going on. So just make sure that you have it all set in correctly, and then we could just keep this limit set to 10. So yep, perfect. So now let's hit save, and then now we can start testing this search records. But if we look back at our table, we can see that we have everyone has been contacted in September except for these 3 leads where they've been contacted in June. So we can see Brian, Robert, and Ryan. So if we run the scenario only, we should only see those 3 leads pop up. Okay. So you have Robert, Brian, and Ryan. Now let's try to alter our sheet, and let's say that also John has been contacted since June. So now that's going to save. Let's go back and let's rerun this. and we should see a John appended as a bundle number 4. So let's run this. Let's see. So, yep, we got bundle number 4. Where's John? Oh, right here. So we have John Cannon, and here we have John Cannon. So cool, it's filtering out correctly. Now, there's going to be some additional filters that we're going to add down the line so that we can add retry logic. What if the user doesn't answer the first call? How are we going to set up the interval so that it calls again for a max number of 3 attempts? So we'll set that up later on in the process when we start testing our AI assistant. So now the next thing to do is we need to add a sleep module, right? So that we can offset the calls, the outbound calls, right? So we don't trigger out a lot of bundles at once to make the outbound call. So we're just going to add this offset. We're going to use a sleep module, and let's say we sleep it for a delay of 3 seconds. Okay. And then I'm just going to rename this also. Let's do delay, or a 3-second delay. And then also let's rename this too. Okay, search rows for leads over 30 days. Okay, so now the next thing to do is we have to set up an HTTP request so that we can actually initiate the outbound call using Vapi's APIs. So we're going to choose make an API key auth request, right? And here, if you haven't used this specific module before, you are going to need to add a keychain. Now, what this does is usually when you need to access APIs, there's an important process of authentication. Now, in most cases, documentation have you put your header or your API key in the headers, but that can expose your API key and lead to vulnerabilities. So the safer way around it, especially on Make, is using an HTTP auth request where we save the API key as a keychain, and Make will hide your keychain whenever we're making requests. So it's essentially a more safer alternative so that you're not exposing important environment variables or your API key in this case. So what you're going to want to do is click add and then give it a name. For instance, you can name it either by the assistant, or you can just name like, oh, this is Vapi, right? But the way I like to go about it is name it by the assistant, and then also state where this key is for, where the key is going to be placed, which is the header, and what this is. So I like to name it like this: Ava Vapi header API key. Sometimes keys get stored in the header. Sometimes keys get stored in the query parameter. So that's one thing you got to know, and also put this in the name so that you can clearly identify, okay, this key is used here, right? Now, it's going to be placed in the header, and the API key parameter name needs to be authorization. Now, if you're wondering, hey, how do you know all this stuff? Well, it's just referencing the documentation on Vapi. So let's navigate to that now so you can get a better understanding of how I'm setting this up. Okay, so here I'm in Vapi docs. You're going to want to go to the API reference, right? And just keep in mind again that what we're doing is we're creating a call. So we want to go to the calls section, create a call. And here we're giving a little bit more information on how to integrate with your API. So it's of type post, meaning we're going to be sending data. We're going to be creating in the backend, right? So it's a type post, and then this is our URL endpoint. So we're going to copy this, or actually we're not going to copy this yet. Let's look at how we're going to set up authorization, which is going to be an API key. So we can see the name is authorization, which we already set up right here, authorization, and it's in the headers. So if we look at the documentation again, it says capital H. So that means that this needs to be supplied in the headers. And the value for authorization is going to be bare space and then the API key. So that's something to keep in mind. So here, when you create your keychain, right here for the key, add bare and then space, and then paste in your private API key, which I'll do now. Okay, so I have my API key entered. If you do not know where to get this API key, all you have to do is go to your Vapi dashboard, look on the left side, and look for API keys, and then grab your private API key. Once you have that placed in and you put bear, capital B, space token, and then you have it in the headers and you have authorization and you also give it a really good descriptive name, go ahead and hit create. Okay, so now that you have created your API key, which I have right here, now we have to enter in the URL endpoint. So going back to the documentation, we can see that this is the URL endpoint. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste it right here. Now the method is of type post. Now post means we're going to be sending data. We're going to be sending a request body, which we'll set that up in the next few seconds. But in the headers, looking back here again, we need to add content type application JSON. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing. I'm going to paste it in right here, but I'm going to move this down below. And also don't forget to remove the column. So here we have content type, application JSON. Now the next thing to add is the body type. So the body is going to be raw and the content type is going to be JSON. Now this is where we're going to add our request body. Now if we look at the documentation, we can see the request body is pretty much just an empty object, meaning for this specific create call API that we're trying to interact with, right? It doesn't really provide much information on how we can create a call and pass dynamic variables. So to reference that, we're going to need to click on the search bar and type in variables. Okay, and then here we'll have this JSON payload that we need to pass in order to create the call and also pass the dynamic variables. Now, when we say dynamic variables, what does that mean? So we're going to be extracting data points from the Airtable sheet, such as the phone number, the name, their type, are they buyer or the seller, and we're going to be passing that into the HTTP request so that the assistant can use those variables throughout the call. So for instance, we're going to be passing first name. So when Ava reaches out to the lead, it will have the first name value passed in, right? So we need to use this payload to pass those dynamic variables into the call so Ava can reference that and personalize the outreach to the lead, right? So this is pretty much what we need, but I already have a modified version of this. It's essentially the same thing. I just plugged in the variable values and yeah, so all the variable values that we're going to be working with. And yeah, so let's navigate back to Make and I will provide it right here on what we need to use for the payload. Okay, so right here I have the payload pasted in, and again, just to reference it, compare it to the payload that's provided in documentation, we have the assistant ID, the assistant overrides, and then we also have the customer and then phone number. If we look back, it's the same thing. We have the assistant ID, the assistant overrides, customer, and phone number ID. I just already mapped in or assigned the data points to these specific keys, right? Another thing to point out, if you're new to like this whole JSON stuff, just know, so you understand, JSON are made out of objects. So these squiggly brackets is a good indicator if it's an object or not. So this means it's an object. Now the object consists of key and value pairs. This is the key. This is the value. This is the key. This is the value, right? Just to give you a little bit more context of how this JSON works. So going back to here, you want to replace this with your actual assistant ID, and you could just grab that on Vapi at your assistant. And then assistant overrides, we have variable values. And just remember that the assistant is going to be referencing the first name. It's also a good idea to pass the last name. It needs the type, needs to know if the user or the lead is a buyer or seller, and also the property interest. And then I also passed in special notes for Ava, so that it can even more further personalize the message to the lead. Another thing to keep in mind is make sure that you map in or you enter these data points that are coming from this Airtable. You can see if I hover over it, it's it's making this Airtable kind of expand and shrink. That means that we're getting these data points from that specific module. So we have first name wrapped in double quotes, last name wrapped in double quotes. Another thing, make sure that you always have commas after or before the next key value pair. We have type in double quotes. We have property interest in double quotes, special notes for Ava in double quotes. And then customer, always add a +1 and then the phone number. This is very important. If you do not have the phone number formatted correctly, it will not be able to trigger that outbound call. So if you have +1 and then the variable appended, make sure on your Airtable sheet, we don't have a +1. As you can see right here, I have a 1 right here. So this is going to throw off the whole API trigger, right? It would be +1, 1, and then the phone number. So just keep that in mind. And then right here, be sure to replace this with your actual phone number ID from the phone number that you purchased, right? So once you have all that set, and then go ahead and click save. And then let's also just rename this so that we can keep everything organized. So I'm going to put Vapi in parentheses just so I know exactly what platform we are integrating with in regards to the API. And then this is a create call request. All right, cool. So this is essentially our first scenario done. We have an Airtable that we are adding a formula so that we can find all the rows and leads that is over 30 days. We're going to add a 3-second sleep delay, and then we're going to pass that bundle, and we're going to trigger the outbound call with these dynamic variables passed in. So Ava can use that to personalize the call. So if you made it this far, awesome. Now let's set up our second scenario, which would be handling all the tools and also the end call report. Let's get started on our second scenario. And let's just rename this Ava scenario 2, right? And looking back at our design, so we have a custom webhook that pretty much branches out to these different paths. We have a get date time tool, get cal open slots tool, book call tool, and the end call report. So let's get this configured. So we have a webhook, custom webhook, and here we'll need to create a new webhook, and let's just name it Ava webhook. And then this is going to be the webhook URL, and we'll need to paste this in Vapi. We'll do that in the next steps, but this is where we're going to send all the data to whenever we initiate any tools or send the end call data report. We'll be sending it to this URL, webhook URL. So hit save. And now, just to keep everything organized, whenever we're assigning variables, I like to do that up front after the webhook response. I'm sorry, the custom webhook. So we're going to use set multiple variables. Last name, phone number, intent, appointment, date, time, and lastly, preferred date, time. And for your variable names, you want to make sure that you follow this convention. This is how we have named our variables throughout the whole system. So make sure you're using the snake case, first underscore name, last underscore name. And yeah, just make sure you're following this format. Okay. Now we will map or assign the variable values later on when we start sending some data to this webhook. But for now, we'll just leave it as is. So let's hit save. And then now we need a router. This is how we're going to branch out to the different paths. So we're going to have 3 paths. So I'm just going to add another one, and let's start renaming these. This one's going to be the get date time. This one is going to be get availability. add another fourth one. This one's going to be book appointment. And this one's going to be the end call report. Now, the way we're going to branch to these different paths is when we send over the data, there will be a key and value pair, right, that references the tool name. So if the tool name equals get date time, we're going to continue down this path. If the tool name equals the get slots or whatever we named it, and then we're going to go down this path. And same thing for the other ones, right? So first, we need to configure this get date time path. Now, the way we're going to do it is we're going to use tools. We're going to set multiple variables. And we're going to use makes built-in functions such as like the date or the now so that we can provide the dates, the current date, and also the upcoming days over the next 7 days so that Ava has as much context as possible when users say things like next Monday, next Wednesday, or early next week. Ava will be able to process or parse that natural language and use this tool's response so it can handle date and time queries. So the first value is going to be current date time. And then the second value will be days of week. Now, the way we're going to set this up is we'll use a format date function, right? And we'll pass it in as now. So the way this works is it's a format date function. It takes two parameters. This is the input, this first one, and then this is the output. So it's going to take in the current date and time right now, and it's going to format it. It's going to output the day of the week, the month, the day, the year, and also the time. And then the days of the week, we're pretty much just going to use the add days function so that we can add days and give it the whole week, a whole upcoming week, essentially. Now, I know this looks really messy. There's probably like better ways to go about it, but this works for me. What we're doing is we're taking the first date, which is today, right? And we are going to add 1 day to it. So it's going to give the day for tomorrow. This one's going to give the day for 2 days from now. This one's going to give the day 3 days from now, 4 days from now, 5 days from now, 6 days from now, 7 days from now, so that it will return the whole week. And we'll see what that output looks like later on when we start playing around with this tool. So let's hit save and let's rename this. So set dates and days of week. And then we're going to use a webhook response so that we can return that data back to Ava, and Ava will be able to, again, reference date and time queries. Now, this body requires a JSON, and essentially this is the output. Now, there's still some missing pieces, like we have to still map that in, but we'll come back and do that. I like to just lay everything down and then make the refinements, add the last data points that's required, and then run my testing, right? So we still also have to map in the tool call ID, so just keep that in mind. But what we're returning is today's date is, and it'll be the current day and time. And we can see we're getting this value from the set multiple variables module that we just created. And the days of the week are, and then here it will be returning the whole days of the week. Okay, so let's hit save. If this is your first time like using Make, probably looking at something like this might be a little confusing. So let me just clone this and just show you how I got this set up. So here, now this is just temporary. You don't actually need to clone it. You can just modify it here. But what you're going to do is when we click on this, you have this tab that opens up. You're going to click on this calendar looking icon, and we're going to use format date. Now here, it takes two parameters. We want to plug in at this first spot is the now. And then after the colon, right? So we have this other side. Now this is going to be the output. So here we're going to put day or D, 3 Ds, and then comma, right? And then we're going to use capital M / capital D / and then Y. And then here we're just going to add in a HH period MM, and then, and I believe it's capital A. Let me see if I did that right. Yep. So HH MM and then capital A. We can see it will format. It'll output the date like this. So what we did was we added the day and then comma, and then we're going to output the date like this, which will look like this. And we also will output the time, which will look like this. So returning back to Ava will look something like Tuesday, for example, Tuesday, September 28th, 2025, right? So that's something it would output, and then also output like 2 p.m. And then Ava will be able to use that to understand the day and also what date it is and the time. Hopefully that clears things up if this is like really new to you. And then the same thing for days of the week. It's the same thing, but what I did was I added in inside the first parameter, right? I used a add days function inside, which is right here. And then you move this one, same thing. So this add days takes two parameters. Right here, you're going to put in the now, and then this will be how many days you want to add. So if you want to add 1 day, we just put 1. If you want to add 2 days, we add 2. So that's essentially the logic that I'm implementing down below. So you could just pause it, follow this structure, and put that in for your days of week. So I'm just going to delete this. Okay, another thing I want to quickly point out, to make this set dates and days of week work, you have to make sure that your make organization's time zone is set correctly. So to make sure, you're going to look at the left hand side and you're going to click on organization. And then you're going to click on organization settings. And then you can see here that I have my time zone set for America, Los Angeles. So PST time. So what's going to be returned back to Ava is going to be the dates in PST time. Now, if you're in EST or you're in another country, you're going to want to make sure that this time zone is set correctly, because the date that it's going to return is going to be the date that's aligned with how you have it set up here. So that's just one thing to know. Okay, so now that we have the date and time set up, now let's set up our get availability. So here, again, referencing our design, we will have a HTTP request, and then we're going to return the open slots back to Ava via Webhook response. So let's go ahead and just set that up. So we're going to use an HTTP request again, and it's going to be make an API key auth request. Now, this time we're actually going to be getting slots from Cal via their APIs by the event ID. So we are going to need to create another keychain so that we can properly integrate with Cal. So first, looking at the documentation, right, we're going to be getting the available time slots from or for an event type. And we can see that the requirement is one, it's a type get. This is going to be the URL endpoint that we're going to hit. And then also we need to provide in the headers the Cal API version, right? And then also we always need to provide the API key. So if we go to the very top, introduction to API v2, we can see right here, authentication. We have 3 methods, API key, platform OAuth, or access token. We're going to be using this method. Now, the way we're going to have to do it is we have to, again, assign authorization as the parameter name, and then we need to provide the value bear space token. So very similar to the way we had to set it up for Vapi. So let's go ahead and start getting this set up. So going back to make, you're going to click add. You're going to give it a descriptive name. So something like Ava, Cal, and this is going to be a header key. We can also put V2, V2 API key. So this is how I would name this specific key. You're going to add bear space and then your token. Now, where do you actually get your token? Let's go back to our Cal dashboard, right? You're going to click on settings. You're going to go to API keys, and then you're going to click add. You're going to give it a name, give it like a name, maybe like Ava, whatever you want. You can either set it to expire after 30 days, or you can set it to never expire, whatever you prefer. Once you click on save, it's going to generate you a key. It's very important that you store that key somewhere. So copy, paste it in your notes, paste it somewhere, right? But don't expose your API key. Always keep your API key secure, right? So once you copy it and you save it somewhere in a private note, and then you're going to take that key, you're going to go back to make, and here after the space, you're going to paste it in right here. Okay. And then once you paste it in, you're going to place it again in the header. So it needs to be in the header. And then also we need authorization. And then we already set up this part, which is here in the key. So once you have that made, and then you're going to hit create. I already have mine made, so I'm going to choose this Ava Cal V2 header API key. And then the URL endpoint that we need for this is going to be, let's go back to slots. Okay, here we have slots. We want to get available time slots for an event type. And then let's copy this URL endpoint. We're going to keep it at type get. And in the headers, we need to add the Cal API version. So let's just copy this right here. And the value is going to be set right here. So this is the Cal API version that we need. And let's paste it right here. Now, they provide us 4 different ways to get slots by event type. Now, the way we're going to do it is we're just going to supply a start, which is required, an end time, which is required, and then also the event type ID. Okay. So let's add these as query parameters. So we need to add the start. So here in query string, we're going to add start. Let's also add an end. And then we also need event type ID. And we need to make sure that we add it in exactly how they've stated it here. Okay. Now, what we're going to map to the value as start is the preferred date time. So if you think about it, if a lead is interested, buyer or seller, and they would like to schedule a time, right? Ava is going to ask, okay, is there a date and time that you would like for your appointment? So this is going to be assigned as the preferred date and time. So we want to check, what does the slots look like at the user's preferred date and time, right? And then the end. Now here we can be flexible. We can set it to a larger window frame so that we can get more availability, right, for the user. I like to just set it up to maybe like 3 to 7 days ahead, so that we can just look at what's the availability for the whole week looking like. So for us to do that, we can use their built-in functions. We're going to click on this calendar icon, and let's also add days. So add days takes in two parameters. So this is the input, this is the output. The input we want to provide is going to be the preferred date time. And then we want to add 7 days to this. So right here, the start time, we're setting it to the preferred date time. The end time is we're adding 7 days, right? And we're looking for what slots are open, right, for the next 7 days based on the provided time that they give us here. Okay. And then the event type ID, to get this, we're going to go to Cal. And then you can click on the event that we created. And then if you look at the URL, now you might not be able to see this on my Screen Studio. It's probably clipping off the top part, but there is a 7-digit combination of numbers that you want to copy. This is going to be the event type ID. So let's copy this. Let's go back to make and let's paste it in right here. Okay. And then let's just verify that we have everything correct. Okay. So we have the Cal API version. We have the API key connected. We have the start and end time, which is required. And then we also have the event type ID and we have the value set right here. So looking good. Let's hit save. Now let's also rename this to something like Cal, again, just to notate where exactly we are integrating with. And this is going to be get open slots by event ID. Okay. Now, the next step is to return the data back to Ava. But when we get the data back from Cal, it's going to be in UTC format, which is the coordinated universal time. So that's also Zulu time. So the offset is at 0. So for Ava to be able to provide dates and times that make sense to the user, we're going to have to do some conversions, and we can use a GPT completion so that we can convert UTC times to PST times or Mountain Time or Eastern Time. Whatever your time zone is, we can use a GPT completion module so we can convert the dates before actually providing the open slots back to Ava so that we provide a good user experience. Now, I've played around with many ways of going about this before, and I found that this is the best way to go about it. Sometimes when you send the UTC dates as a response back to Vapi, the assistants can sometimes struggle converting the dates in real time, which leads to poor user experience and a lot of confusion on why bookings or the slots being provided aren't actually aligned with your calendar. Well, it's probably that reason. It's because the dates being provided by Cal are in UTC, so we got to do some conversions. So we're going to use a GPT completion module. And then the model that we need is going to be the 4.1. And then we're going to add a developer system message. And then here we're going to add in this prompt. Okay, so just to kind of break this down, you are a time zone conversion and formatting assistant. Take this JSON response from Cal, which includes a list of available slots in UTC, and return a new JSON object where 1, all date time strings are converted to PST. So you're going to want to modify this for your time zone. Each slot should be represented by 1 string in human readable format like 2 p.m. to 2:30 on Thursday. This is so that the assistant Ava returns the data back in a more user-friendly way. Return the final result as JSON object where each key is a date, right, in this format, and the value is a list of open slot strings. This is the input, so we're going to pass in the input, right? We can see that this data is coming from this module, right? So we're passing in the data coming from Cal of the date slots that are in UTC format. And this is the output that we want, okay? Do not return any explanation or commentary, just valid JSON, okay? And we're also going to set our max tokens to 800, okay? And then another note is if Again, if you're new to Make and you're new to using ChatGPT or OpenAI's APIs, you're going to want to go to OpenAI and set up an account so that you can access their APIs. You may need to add some funds to your wallet so that you can have some API usage. If you're not sure on how to do that, and then you can just look up a video on YouTube. It's really simple on how to get your OpenAI account set up so that you can start using the APIs. So if you need to do that, go ahead and pause, find a video, and then return back so that we can continue with the automation. Okay. But once you've done so, let's go ahead and hit save. And then now the next step is to use a webhook response so that we can return the converted times back to Ava. Another thing I want to do is just rename this GPT module so that it's clear on what it needs to do. So I'm going to rename it to something like convert UTC to PST. Okay. Now we have to set up the webhook response back, and this is going to require JSON. And here, again, just like this webhook here, there is a missing component to it. We need to map it into call ID, but we'll map that when we start sending some data over from Vapi to this webhook. But we want to make sure that the structure is like this. This may or may not work. We'll see when we start testing our assistant, but we are returning an array of available slots. So let's just hit save. Okay, now let's set up our book appointment path. So we're going to use an HTTP request again, make an API key auth request. And since we're going to be using Cal's API again, we're going to use this Ava Cal v2 header API key. Now, the URL endpoint that we need to hit in order to create an event or book an appointment is going to be here. So I'm in bookings, create a booking, and we can see the URL endpoint is here. Type post. We also have some headers that we need to add, content type, and also the Cal API version. We can also see what we need to provide as the data in order to make this booking. So we need the start, we need the attendee object. We also need booking field responses, and then also the event type ID. And that is essentially everything we need to create the event in the calendar. Okay. So let's grab this URL endpoint and let's paste it right here. And it's of type post because we're going to be sending data in the body request. Headers. We need to add in content type, application JSON. Let's bring this down here. And then we also need the API version. So we can grab this. And that value is right here. Okay. Now, these are the only headers that we need to provide. Now we need to configure the body type. So it's raw. It's going to be JSON. And then the request body that we'll be using is this here. Okay. So very similar to the data points that is referenced in the documentation. So we have the start, attendee object. We don't need the booking field responses since everything that's in the booking field, all the questions we're asking is already going to be in the attendee object. So the only thing we need to provide to create a booking is the name and also the phone number. Okay. So those are the only points. So let's go back. So we have the start time, which is the appointment date and time. And then we have the attendee object. We're mapping in the first name and the last name, time zone, America, Los Angeles, which is PST time. So adjust this if need be. Phone number, ensure that you're adding a +1, right? Or if you're in a different country, and then just provide your country code here. And then here I have it set to English. And then I also added in the event type ID, which again, you can get if you go to your event and you look at the top in the URL, you should see a 7-digit combination. That is going to be the event type ID that we need to use. Okay. So now that we got this, everything looks good. So let's go ahead and hit save. Also, another thing, just ensure that all the values that we're mapping in are coming in from the tools. Now, keep in mind, currently, these are all empty. So let me just go back. So right now it's empty. So if you try to call your assistant and it tries to work with the tools, it's not going to work correctly because we haven't mapped everything. We will do that in the steps to come. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So let's also rename this so that we're keeping everything organized. Again, this is Cal API, and this is going to be book event. Now, the next thing to do is just return that response back to Vapi so Ava can inform the user that they have been booked in. And the body that we need to provide is JSON, which is this. Okay. And again, always keep in mind that we need to map in the tool call ID. Okay. So this is currently empty. We'll need to do that. Let's hit save. Now, the next thing is setting up our end call report path, right? So to do this, we're going to use a search records. So we're going to select a new module. We're going to go to Airtable and we're going to search records. Now, the reason why we need to search records is because, right, we need to identify which row, which lead that we're referencing. So we need to get the ID, but first to get the ID, we need to search the records. And the way we're going to do that is by searching the rows where the phone number matches so that we can see that that's the user. And then we can reference that ID to update them based on our end call report. So we're going to choose the Ava Real Estate Lead Reactivation Workspace. Table is number 1. And here, the formula that we're going to use so that we can match the lead by the phone number is we're going to use open and close squiggly brackets. We're going to do phone number. Now, this has to be exactly the same as how we have it set up in Airtable, right? So also, the way we set it up previously, we may have set it up so that this is a phone number type column. We can switch this to single line text. So switch it. You should be able to edit the field and then change it to single line text. You should see an A. So we're not having any issues parsing based off of phone number, right? So let's change this one to, let's say, so Brian's phone number is 808-123-1234. And then here, we're going to use the formula, and we're going to filter by the phone number. So this needs to equal, and we'll put in double quotes. And then here, we'll map in the phone number that we're getting from the variable, right? So when a lead call ends with the lead, the end call report will have the phone number of the lead that we just called. And then we're going to search the row in Airtable to match the row with the phone number that we got, right? And then we'll get the ID. So here we want to just limit this to 1. Okay. Because we only want one ID that we can reference at a time. If we have multiple rows that we're pulling out, it's going to make it very hard to update the single row that we need. So ensure that you have set it to 1. Okay. So now I'm going to right click. I'm going to run this module only, and let's put in that phone number 808-123-1234, and we should see that lead pop up. Okay. So we see Brian here. Perfect. Now the next thing is we need to update the row. So now when we look at the output, we're given the ID. So this is exactly what we need. So we need the ID. So we're going to, again, use an Airtable module, and we will update a record by its ID. So now that we can reference that ID from this right here, so we're going to choose Ava Real Estate Lead Reactivation Workspace, table number 1. And then we want the ID to reference this right here. Okay, now that we have the foundation laid down, now we have to get everything connected on Vapi and Make. So we need to connect our tool call IDs. assign and connect all the variable values, but we also need to add our webhook URL to our Vapi account so that it can send all the data for the tool calls and end call report to this scenario here, which we have been working on all along. Okay, so we're going to grab this webhook URL. So let's copy to clipboard. Let's go to Vapi, and we want to go to the advanced and scroll down to messaging. Now we want to add in the webhook URL right here. And what this is going to do is when the call is done, it's going to send the end call report to this here, which is our scenario right here. And then also right here, we need to update server messages. Right now it's sending a lot of different server messages that we don't need. If we send all this data, we are going to use a lot of operations. So we want to make sure that we do this right. We want to untoggle all of them and only send the end call report. Okay. So once you have that, and then you want to hit save. And then also what we need to do is add the webhook URL to all our tools. So here we're going to add the webhook URL, hit save, add it to the get cal open slots tool and hit save. And then also add to get date time and hit save. Okay, perfect. So now we have all the tools connected. So what we want to do is go back to our make scenario, and we want to start sending over some data to this webhook, not the whole scenario, just this webhook, because we don't want to break it because we don't have our filters set up yet. So I'm going to right click this. I'm going to run this module only. Okay. And I'm going to go to Vapi, and I'm going to chat with the assistant. Now, the reason why is I just wanted to trigger a tool so we get some data sent to that webhook. So I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to say something like I'm interested, but can we schedule a time? Schedule a time in for a call. Okay. And then let's do something like next Monday. Now this is not going to work because the tool is not fully connected, but let's see how it handles it. Okay. So it's trying to call the tool. Perfect. So let's just stop this because that's all we needed. We just needed this right here. Perfect. So it's green, meaning we sent some data to this webhook. Now, if we look at this, we can see that it tried calling the get date time tool. Perfect. That's what it was instructed to do. And the arguments are empty. Now, those arguments is what exactly we need to map in all these values into these variables. And a neat little trick that I like to use is using Postman, which is an API testing tool, so that I can manually just send the data and then map in all the values for the variables. So let's do that. To do that, we're going to click on this right here, and we're going to click on this icon, download output bundles. Now, the way I like to go about it is I like to just scroll to the very bottom and copy from here all the way to the top, all the way up to here. We don't need the open and closing square brackets. We just need everything in between. So let me redo that. Here. Okay. So now I'm going to go to Postman. So you can go to postman.co. You can create an account or log in if you already have an account. And then you're going to click on this plus, which will take you to something like this. Okay. We're going to change it to type post because we're going to be sending data. And then we want to add in the JSON here. Okay. And also make sure that you have it set to raw and then JSON. Then here we're going to put in the webhook URL. So I'm going to go back to make. I'm going to grab that webhook URL, copy to clipboard, and paste it right here. Now, again, we need the arguments so we can map in to our variables on make. First name, last name, phone number, intent, appointment date and time, and preferred date and time. So let's add these in right here. So this is JSON, and the way it works is we need a key, and it needs to be wrapped in double quotes. So I'm going to put first name, and again, let's make sure that our naming conventions are consistent with how we've been doing it throughout the whole system. So make sure it follows this format, It's snake case. So first name or first underscore name. And then here I'm just going to put double quotes and nothing in between. So it's an empty string. That's what you call it. Right. And then now I'm going to add in last name. Same thing, empty string. And then we need phone number, intent, appointment date and time, lastly, preferred date time. Okay. So ensure that every key value pair has a comma except for the last key value pair. This one doesn't need a comma. So you might have an error if you add a comma and it'll show the red squiggly line underneath. So ensure that you have that correct. Okay. So now we have to go back to our scenario. And again, we only want to run this one. Don't run the whole thing, right? Don't click on this purple button down below. Only run this. If we run that, and then it's probably going to break, and not that bad, but you'll probably just have to restart. So you're going to right click on this, run this module only. We're going to wait for new data. We'll go back to Postman. We have the webhook URL set. We have all the arguments passed in. Perfect. So now let's just hit send. Accepted. So it's good. It went through. Let's go back and we can see here. Go ahead to tool calls, function, arguments. We have all the values here that we need to now map in. So let's do that and also assign the tool call ID. So first, let's go to these variables. And now let's go to tool calls, function, arguments. Let's put in the first name, last name, phone number, intent, appointment date time, and then lastly, the preferred date time. And then let's hit save and also hit save on the scenario. Okay. So now what we need is these filters to be fully connected and aligned. So this is the get date time path. So this needs to be if the tool call function name is this right here, this get date time. And then we're going to continue down that path. Now, same thing. If the tool calls function name is now let's go to Vapi and see what we name that. So go to tools. Here we have the get cal open slots tool. So if the name equals to this, and then we're going to go down this path, we're going to get availability. Same thing with this one. Tool calls function name. And let's go to Vapi. So this one is going to be the book call tool. So let's copy this. If it equals to the book call tool, and then we're going to continue down this path. Now this path, we don't have set up yet because of the end call report. So this one, we need to wait until we actually talk with our assistant and then it sends that end call data. So what I like to do is just unlink this for now so it doesn't break the scenario. Okay. So we have the values mapped in. We have the filter set for all paths except for the end call report. Now we have to get the tool call ID. So here we're going to go to tool calls, select ID and hit save. Same thing for the rest of the webhook responses, tool calls, ID, and let's hit save. And then same thing with the last one, tool calls and ID, let's hit save. And then another thing, I noticed that I made a slight error. So this right here, originally you probably have a square open and closing brackets. You need to replace that with squiggly open and square brackets. So you might have something like this currently. We need to switch it to this. Now, again, I'm going to provide this JSON snippet in the resources in the link below in the description so that you can just copy and paste it and already be formatted, good to go. Okay. So now let's hit save and let's save the scenario. Okay, perfect. Now let's run this one more time just to make sure that it's working correctly. But this time I'm going to just hit the run. I'm going to wait for new data. And now we want it to run all the way through, but I'm going to try sending the get date time tool call using Postman. So I'm going to go here. So it's already set to get date time. And let's see the response. Okay, so today is the 29th. This is the time and then the days of the week. Okay, that's exactly what we need. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure it's saved. I'm going to go back and I'm going to just turn on this whole scenario and I'm going to delete old data. Okay. And now I'm going to go back to Vapi and let's try our assistant again. I'm going to chat and see how it returns the available slots for Tom's availability. Okay, so let's try it. Yes. So I'm saying yes, but can we schedule in a call? Let's say next Monday, 11 a.m. Okay, so we're getting the date time tool response. Perfect. Okay, so it says, it looks like Tom is not available at 11 a.m. next Monday. However, he has the following slots open: 2 to 2:30, 2:30 to 3, 3 to 3:30, 3:30 to 4. Let's actually verify if that's correct. So I'm going to go to Cal, event types, and then I'm going to just open this. And I believe I said next Monday, so that's the 6th. So yeah, we only have 2, 2:30, 3, and 3:30. So that is correct. So the tool is working as it should, and we're getting the availabilities. Now let's look at the rest of the flow and see what we can do to improve it so we can finalize this whole system. Okay, so looking at our scenario, we still also have to get this connected, the end call report. So I'm just going to drag this up and we should already have the filtered name, end call report. But the way we're going to filter this is if this type is end call report, and then we'll continue down this path. Now, as I mentioned before, what we're doing is we're searching the records by phone number. Once we find the row that matches the phone number, and then we use that ID so that we can update that specific row. Now, realistically though, because this is the end call report, we need to do a better job at the logic for retrying our attempts, right? Because if you really think about it, in a real world scenario, what are the odds that a user is going to answer their very first time we call, right? So in most cases, people are going to have the call go to voicemail. So one, we need to have our system set up correctly with the voicemail. And we also need to add logic so that we can try every 24 hours for a max of 3 attempts. So for instance, if we call John, right, and John doesn't answer, we leave a voicemail, okay? And then we will update the record based on his phone number to state a voicemail was left, right? And then we're going to wait 24 hours and we're going to try calling John again. If he doesn't answer, then we're going to leave a voicemail and we'll do this a max attempt of 3 tries. Now, every time they don't answer and we leave a voicemail, we'll need to increment the count. So the way we're going to handle this retry logic is all going to be right here. So that is a improvement that I suggest. So let's go ahead and just knock that out so that we have a system that will work in real world scenarios where people don't answer. We have a good voicemail setup, a system set up, and also retry logic so that we can try multiple times to get in touch with the lead. Okay. So what we're going to do is let's just delete this and we're going to add a router. Now we're going to have 2 paths, a path where they answer, and let's just save this, and a path where they do not answer. Yep. So we say did not answer / voicemail. Yep. And then here, if they answered, and then we're going to select an Airtable and we're going to update a record, and we want to choose the workspace we created, table number 1. And then here, this is why we need to get search the records by phone number so that we can grab this ID to reference. Okay. And then last contact date, meaning they answered, so we've been able to get a hold of them. So the contact date is going to be this. So we're going to use the format date, now, and the output is going to be month, day, year, and then the time we reached out to them. So month, day, year, the time we reached out. And we can also add an A here. Okay. And then the attempt count, we're just going to leave it as is. And then the last attempt, let's also add this down here. And then call notes. This is what we'll map in from the structured data that comes from Vapi. And then also the status, which will be a voicemail, answered, whatever it may be. We need to map this in from Vapi, the structured data. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save. Now, if they don't answer, right? And again, we will set our filters for both paths to use the status, right, to help us determine which path to go down. But if they don't answer, again, we're going to use an Airtable. We're going to update a record by its ID. Select the workspace, table number 1. And then also here, we want the ID. Okay. So we have the ID here. And now there are some extra columns that I added, such as attempt count, last attempt, and also status. So let me go back to Airtable. So we want to add attempt count, add last attempt, and also status. So we will pre-populate or populate all these leads with pending, and the status will be updated based on the end call report. Okay. And then attempt count, we want all the leads to start at 0, and then we'll increment it accordingly if they answered or if they did not. If they did not answer, we will update the account so that we can keep track of how many times that we're trying to reach out to the user. So just ensure that you add attempt count, last attempt, and also status. Okay. And then for attempt count, what we're going to do is we're going to use a sum function. We're going to click on A. And then we want, I'm sorry, it's actually this one. So we're going to click on sum. Now what we want is we want to add 2 things. We want to add the attempt count, right? The current value for attempt count. And then we also want to add 1 to it. Okay. So if we call the lead and they do not answer, okay, we're going to take the value for attempt count and we're going to increment it by 1. That's what we're doing. Okay. And then for the last attempt, very similar to the last one, we're going to use a format date. We're going to pass in now as the first parameter. And then we're going to format it to be month, day, and year. And then we can also add in the time. Okay. So now what we also have to do is map in the status in the call notes coming from the structured data. Okay. So now let's hit save. Now, what if they don't answer and it's now the 3rd attempt? So now we need to add a filter logic so that when we reach the 3rd attempt for the lead, it is now time to change their status to cold lead, meaning they're no longer interested, right? So we have not been able to contact them. Therefore, they just remain a cold lead. So let's set that up. Okay. So here, let's also add another Airtable and let's update a record. Okay. But first, let's set up the filter. Let's give it a name, something like attempt is greater than or equal to 3. And then we want to update status. Yep. And then this one, if, and then it should be attempt count, numeric operator, where is it? Greater than or equal to 3. And then we're going to move down this way. And here we want to update the record by the ID again. So we're going to choose the workspace, table, grab the ID coming from this one, right? You should see right here that it's pulsing. So we want to grab the ID from that module. And then we want to set the status to be cold lead. Okay. That way we don't call them again until we change the status of the lead. Okay. So now let's just save this and let's look at Vapi to see how we need to set up our structured data so that we can properly map in the table based on the call outcome. So back in Vapi, we have to first check our structured data, make sure that everything is set correctly so that we can properly map in the data into the Airtable. Yep. So here, let's see, where is it at? Structured data right here. So I also added in a status, right? So be sure to add into the structured data at the very bottom status. And here I added the property and I gave it a description of this status is used to indicate the outcome of the call attempt based on the call interaction. Set status to one of these values: answered, not answered, voicemail, not interested, interested, and do not call. We'll be using these values to help us filter if they answered, if they didn't, and the status on also incrementing the count and also handling the logic on calling after 24 hours. So we'll be using all this. So ensure that you have this added as structured data. Okay. Now let's also set up the voicemail. So for the voicemail, we're going to go, where is it? Let's turn on voicemail detection. Let's set it to Vapi. And then also max retries. Let's just set this to 1. And then the max voicemail message wait, let's just set this to something like 5. And then, yep, I think that's good settings for now. And then our actual voicemail message, let's add something like, okay, so this looks like a mess. All right, so if interested, please call us back at 808. So let's add commas, 8, 0, 8. And then here, let's add a dash, 590. Here, let's add a dash, 0, 5, 4, 5. Okay, perfect. Yep. So let's just go ahead and publish this. So now if we call the lead and they don't answer, we'll leave a voicemail. So that's perfect. Okay, guys, we are almost done. Next, we need to set up in our scenario 1, the retry logic so that we call the lead after every 24 hours if the lead doesn't pick up the first, second time. Okay, so right here, let's just name it retry logic. And again, we're in scenario 1. And what we want is if the status, right? So we need to look at 3 things. If the status is pending, or if the status is not answered, right? Or if the status is voicemail, and then we know we want to try it again. And also we need to make sure that the attempts are less than 3. And the last thing is we want to make sure that it's been over 24 hours. So the way we're going to go about it is we're going to add these conditions. So if status is equal to pending, or if status is equal to not answered, or if status is equal to voicemail, and then we want to make the call again. But there's another condition that needs to be met. per each condition, which is if the attempt count is less than 3. So we're going to use numeric operator. So less than 3. And then same thing for all these ones. Attempt count needs to be less than 3. And same with this one. Less than 3. And then the third condition that needs to be met is if the last attempt is, if it's been over 24 hours and then we want to try to make the call again. So we're going to use the date time if it's earlier than or equal to, and then here we want to use an add hours function. So you're going to click on this date right here. You're going to select add hours. And then you're going to add now, and then you're going to do the minus 24. So it's going to check to see if 24 hours have went by. Okay. And then same thing for these other two conditions. So this needs to be the last attempt. Date time operator earlier than or equal to, and then we can paste in this. Okay, let's hit save. And there we have our retry logic set up. So we're going to call the lead for a number of 3 attempts. Okay, and then we are going to set the lead as a cold lead if we reach the maximum number of attempts and we have not been able to get all of them. So now the last thing to do is to just map out the data points in the Airtable and then run our final testing. Okay, so before we run our final test, there is these last few small changes we need to make in Vapi. So under the analysis tab, under the summary prompt, originally we had a long detailed summary that instructed to output a JSON, but we do not need that. So I got rid of that entirely and I replaced it with this short prompt. So your task is to write a thorough call summary in a few sentences outlining key information and outcomes of the call. So I believe for this use case, this is suffice enough. So just you can swap it out with this, but again, this will be provided as a resource in the link below in the description so that you can just copy and paste it. Okay. And then status right here under structured data, ensure that you have status and then also you have the property set with this description. Okay. And then another thing I want to point out is in the Airtable, right? Our table that we have created, we originally had an error column, but we're not going to be working with any error data at the moment. So I just got rid of that, but ensure that you have attempt count, everything set to 0. Also set a last attempt column, call notes, and status, and I have everything set to pending. Okay. And then now, before we run the test, we need to first have the assistant give us a call, right? And so that we can trigger an end of call report, right? Because we want to send that data to this webhook so that we can finish mapping in everything into the Airtable so that we can assign the status to the appropriate section right here for each lead. Okay. So the way we're going to go about this is you're going to right click only on the webhook. So you're going to right click on this and you're just going to run this module only. We don't need to run everything. We just want to have the assistant give us a call, right? So that we can shortly, engage with it and then end the call. So then it sends the end call report, but we only want it here so that we can just start mapping in the Airtable. So you're going to right click, run this module only. Okay. And then in your Airtable, put yourself as the first lead, map in some dummy data for each of these fields. And then also put in your phone number. Just make sure that your phone number doesn't have +1 or anything. It just needs to be the phone number. We will append that in the HTTP request if you remember. So put yourself here and then give it like a date that's over 30 days so that your row pops up, and then give the rest a newer date that's within 30 days. Okay. and then go back to the scenario 1, right? And then you're just going to right click, run this module only. And then you should only see your row and your phone number here. So when we run the scenario, it will trigger the outbound call only to you. Okay. So again, just ensure that you have this webhook. So you're just going to run this module only. And then you're going to go back to here, run this module only, ensure that your row is popping up with your phone number. And then you're just going to click on run once. Okay. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to send over some data, and then we'll walk through on how we can map the data into the Airtable correctly for the status property. Okay. So I just had the assistant give me a call, and we can see we have some data that got sent over. And here it is the end of call report. So I believe I set this filter up wrong. So this needs to be end of call report. So ensure that you have that correctly set as well. End of call report. We can see right here, it's message type end of call report. Okay. So let's hit save. And then if we go to the analysis, we can see we have a short summary, and we also have the structured data points that we need that we can map in to the status in our Airtable. So we can see we're given a status of not interested. Okay. So, and we can also play with these other different data points in our table. We can create more columns so that we can improve the table for our system. Okay. So here, now I'm going to start mapping in some data points. Another thing I want to point out is we're given the phone number. So this is going to be important. We're going to need this phone number so that we can map and to this module so that we can get the record by the phone number, then get its ID so that we can properly update the correct lead. Okay, so let's start knocking this out. Now, the way we can go about this so that we can strip out that +1 so that we can properly use this formula to look for the phone number in our sheet, right? We're going to let's not use this value, this variable altogether. Let's just directly reference the customer.number because this is exactly what we need. But we need to use some built-in functions in make, which is the substring. So how we can clip out that +1 so that we can only get the phone number that we need is substring, it takes in 3 different parameters, but we only need 2. So we need to provide the input, which is going to be the customer number coming from Vapi. We just drag this in right there. Oops, right. And we only want to go to the second position because so at the 0th position, it's going to be the plus. At the first position, it's going to be the 1. And then where the number really starts is at the second number, right? So we're just going to put 2. Okay, let's hit save. And then now let's try to run this module only. I'm going to put in a phone number that I know for sure is in my Airtable. I'm going to add the +1. And perfect. So we can see that my information popped up and it has the phone number right here without the +1. So that's working correctly. Okay. So now for the rest of the data points, we need to still map in all this structured data. Okay. Especially the status. So let's go into this module here and we need to update the status. So let's map in status from the end call report. So go to analysis, structured data, and let's put in status. Okay. And then let's hit save. And then also we can map in some more data points. So let's go back in. We can also map in call notes. So we can add in the analysis summary. And yeah, so that looks good enough for now. Okay. So now in the did not answer or voicemail path, okay, let's go into here and let's also add in the status, analysis, structured data, and then status. And also we can map in the summary into call notes. Okay. So just to final wrap up, ensure that you have the end of call report. And then also inside this module, you are no longer using the phone number from the multiple variables, but we're using the phone number directly from the end call report, and we're using a substring so that we can clip out the first two characters, which is the plus and the 1. And then also right here, we want to add in the status so that we can filter. So we're going to go to the analysis, structure data, and status. If the status is equal to answered, again, this needs to be exactly the same with how we have it in Vapi. So let's go to here. So we have answered, not answered, voicemail. Okay. I'm just going to copy these two because we're going to need these. So if they answered, they're going to go down this path. And then for this one, if the status is equal to not answered, or if the status is equal to voicemail, and then continue down this path. Okay, and we can hit save. Okay, so we have those filters set, and then also in the Airtable, we are mapping in the summary into the call notes, the status into the status column, and then also in the answered path, we're mapping in the summary into the call notes again, and then also the status. So everything looks good. Now let's just save this whole thing, auto align it, and then hit save. And then now let's run our final test. Okay, I'm going to be testing it through two scenarios. The first one, I'm going to have it call me, and I'm going to send it to voicemail so we can see how it leaves the voicemail. The second attempt, I'm going to have it call me, and then I'm going to book an actual appointment, right? But before we do that, there's a small thing that we need to tweak, which is going to be here in this filter. So previously I had it set up where it was message analysis structured data status. If that equals voicemail, we need to switch this to the ended reason, right? So when the assistant calls the user, calls the lead, and it leaves a voicemail, it's going to send an ended reason of voicemail. So we can set that to ended reason. So I'm going to click on this. We can grab the ended reason from here, and then we can add that here, and then text operator equals to voicemail, so that if it comes back that it left a voicemail, it still goes down this second path here. Okay, so also just make sure that you have the scenario on and running, right? And then you can go to scenario 1. Try to run this module only just to make sure that your row pops up. Once you see that your row with the phone number pops up correctly, and then we can hit run once. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and I'll come back with the voicemail that it left. Okay, so I just got the voicemail. So let's hear the recording.
Calling on behalf of Good Looking Realty Group. We wanted to reconnect to see if we can help you with buying or selling a home. If interested, please call us back at 808-590-0545.
Okay, so sounds good to me. Now, the voicemail message can be improved, but at least the functionality is working. Second attempt, I'm going to have it call me, and I'm going to book an appointment. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, I'm getting the call.
Hello, am I speaking with Quincy?
Yes, this is he.
Quincy, this is Ava. I am calling on behalf of Tom's Good Looking Realty team. Did I catch you at an okay time?
Yeah, I have a few moments to chat. What's up?
Great. Just wanted to check in and see if you're still interested in buying a home. Are you still planning to look for that 3-bedroom place in Scottsdale?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful to hear. Have there been any updates on your home search or changes in your budget or timeline?
Actually, I don't have too much time right now. I have to jump on another call. Is it possible to schedule a time where we can talk more about this?
Absolutely, Quincy. We can definitely schedule a time for you to talk. When would be a preferred date and time for you to have?
Let's do next Monday at 2 p.m.
It looks like Tom is actually not available next Monday at 2 p.m. However, he does have some slots open later in the week. Would you be available for a call on Thursday?
Thursday, 2 p.m. works.
your appointment with Tom for Thursday, October 2nd at 2 p.m. You'll be all set to discuss your home.
Now looking at our Airtable to see how it populated into the sheet. So looking at it, here's my row, and here the last attempt. So the date was set, the call notes, and also status was set to answered. And then let's just expand the note just to see what was summarized. So Ava from Tom's Good Looking Realty called Quincy to follow up on his interest in buying a 3-bedroom home in Scottsdale. Ultimately, it looks like scheduled a follow-up appointment for Quincy to speak with Tom on Thursday, October 2nd. So the summary is accurate. So perfect, exactly what we need. Now let's quickly head over to Cal to ensure that the booking fully went through. Okay, and we can see 30-minute call with Quincy McCants. And yeah, so everything's connected and working as it should. Good job if you made it this far. And that's how you build a fully automated lead reactivation system that brings old real estate leads back to life without cold calling or chasing people manually. Whether you're an agent, a team leader, or developer helping clients, this is how you scale follow-up like a top producer. If you found this valuable, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And if you want this built for your business, or you're ready to integrate voice AI into your sales process, then head to the description down below and book a free discovery call with me. I'll walk you through how this works for your specific needs. My name is Quincy, and I will see you next time. Peace.